Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of 6 Minutes. I'm Andrea Stone and today's episode is talking about the importance of limiting nutrients in terms of the human, animal, and global health implications. Technical difficulties. So first we will be talking about some new research fresh out of Cornell University. We'll first define limiting nutrients for you as the nutrient that is exhausted first and thus limits growth. The study out of Cornell examined the effect of potassium phosphate on Chlamydomonas reinhardti growth. This is an algae that is found in a lot of our water systems. And now algae growth is important because of the negative effects associated with algae blooms, which can result in anoxic water that kills the aquatic ecosystem. Now, potassium phosphate is commonly found in fertilizers, which, as we all know, often run off of our agriculture production systems into our waterways. Though the data produced demonstrated that potassium phosphate hinders algae growth, the extent to which potassium phosphate is able to suppress normal algae growth remained unknown. The composition of waste leaching into waterways should be analyzed in order to determine the nutrients being delivered into our waters and to study the effects these nutrients have on organismal growth. To talk to us more about organismal growth is Kayla Halfley. Hello, Kayla. Thank you for coming on our show.
Great to be here.
So let's cut to the chase. Why should we humans care about limiting nutrients?
Okay, well there's an order of macronutrients to which they're used for ATP production, the main energy source that drives all our metabolic functions. So glucose is the main metabolite that powers ATP synthesis.
Glucose, that's sugar. Us Americans are known around the world for our sugar consumption. What role does this play in terms of limiting nutrients?
We'll take the macronutrient starch. It's broken down into glucose, and that's the macronutrient used up first to create ATP, then fats, and then protein. And since the body is able to make glucose from fats and protein, we're actually consuming more sugar than needed.
So does this overconsumption of a limiting nutrient make us sick?
You ever hear of diabetes?
Okay, good point. What about deficiencies in limiting nutrients?
Well, we have the micronutrient B12, which you just need in little amounts, but it's essential for hemoglobin's ability to deliver oxygen to us, which is important for brain development.
So I know that B12 is obtained from animal products, although there are some synthetic vitamin B12 available that's sometimes used to fortify cereals. Any thoughts on childhood vegetarianism?
Well, it's been shown that vegetarian diets significantly increase the risk of developmental defects and retardation in children. That being said, though, adults can survive off a diet as extreme as vegetarianism as long as they have a balanced and diverse diet, because meeting doesn't mean exceeding.
Okay.
Yeah. Like the excessive and deficient amounts of limiting nutrients, they have negative effects on the uptake, metabolism, and synthesis of not just their, nutritional properties, but also other essential nutrients.
Well, thank you for your time, Kayla. Very informative.
Thank you for having me.
In other news, there are also animal health implications associated with limiting nutrients. One of the biggest topics among veterinary medicine nowadays is the idea of feeding the rumen and not the ruminant. What does this mean? There's a microbial population inside ruminants' digestive system, and examining and understanding the limiting nutrient requirements of this microbial population will reduce the exogenous nitrogen waste that's expelled into the environment. Why is this important? Well, 17% of greenhouse gas emissions come from livestock operations. Concentrating feeding operations, as seen on the screen in front of you, strive to get as many animals to market weight as in the shortest amount of time as possible. This causes an excessive feeding of nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphate, which can end up polluting our waters. For more on the global health effects of limiting nutrients, please welcome Meredith Fleming. Hello, Meredith. Thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Meredith, what is your perspective on this?
From an agricultural perspective, understanding the nutrient requirements of plant species allows us to apply the exact amount of nutrients those plants actually need for growth. This is important because there is a tendency in plant operations to try and blanket cover nutrient needs to ensure that all the nutrient requirements are met. Nitrogen is a common limiting nutrient for a number of plant species, so fertilizers and growth promoters are often thrown on crops to ensure that there is enough nitrogen available for the plant to use.
This results in a lot of pollution, doesn't it?
Exactly. Blindly attempting to meet limiting nutrient requirements will result in an excess nutrient application. Whatever isn't taken up by plants will stay on the land, which will then run off into our water systems. This not only pollutes our water, but also destroys aquatic environments.
What about the atmospheric issues associated with the nitrogen cycle?
One product of the nitrogen cycle, shown above, is that the excess nitrogen will eventually turn into nitrous oxide, a harmful greenhouse gas.
So essentially, a better understanding of limiting nutrients can help stop global warming.
Exactly. Knowing the limited nutrient requirements of crop systems will reduce the amount of excess nutrients left on the land. Since all the nutrients applied will be taken up by the plants, this means there will be less nitrogen left on the Earth's surface and subsequently less nitrous oxide expelled into the atmosphere. Since greenhouse gas emission is the leading cause of global warming, understanding the limiting nutrient requirements associated with plant crop operations will help reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emitted, and ultimately will help decrease the anthropogenic contribution to global warming.
Thank you for your time, Meredith.
Thank you.
So just to wrap up today's episode of 6 Minutes, there are a few things to keep in mind. Keeping our Earth in equilibrium requires that we balance nutrient inputs and outputs, both for ourselves, for our plants, and for the animals that we're raising. Overexploiting or obsessing over one or two nutrients will cause oversights of other equally important nutrients to the detriment of the overall system. In order to maintain homeostasis, all parts of the system must be carefully considered and balanced. Please tune in next week for our review of poster sessions in introductory biology classes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that technical difficulties.